The dim lights of Nexus Prime's Grand Council chamber cast long shadows across the polished obsidian floor. The faint hum of air recyclers provided a constant undertone to the tense silence that had fallen over the assembled representatives. Jake Morrison, humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council for the past 17 years, sat rigidly in his seat, his weathered face betraying none of the fury building within him. At 52, his once dark hair had given way to distinguished silver, matching the trim of his formal diplomatic uniform. Behind him stood Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, her posture perfect, eyes alert as she scanned the chamber. 30 years. 30 years of human service to the Galactic Council. 3 decades of building alliances, defending territories, advancing mutual interests, and sharing technological innovations. Jake had personally witnessed 20 of those years, rising through the diplomatic corps with a combination of intellect, charm, and unwavering dedication to human interests. The Council had been humanity's gateway to the stars, their introduction to a complex interstellar political landscape that predated Earth's first spaceflight by millennia. Resolution 4471 is hereby presented for final vote, announced Speaker Vexathera, the insectoid BX-Atheran representative, whose translucent wings caught the light as she hovered above her podium. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic display of the resolution text. The motion to revoke humanity's exploitation rights in the Outer Rim territories has been thoroughly debated. The Resource Committee has determined that human expansion threatens ecological stability in sectors G17 through K32. Jake felt his jaw tighten. The ecological stability excuse was paper-thin. The Outer Rim had been considered worthless space until human innovation had discovered how to efficiently extract neuroptorium from the asteroid fields. Now, suddenly, after 15 years of human investment, thousands of lives lost to establish those mining operations, the Council wanted to redistribute the rights. Ambassador Morrison, Vexathera's mandibles clicked softly. Does humanity wish to make a final statement before the vote? Lieutenant Sullivan leaned forward slightly. Sir, she whispered, the President's instructions were clear. We are to register formal protest but accept the Council's decision. Jake nodded, almost imperceptibly. At 30, Kate Sullivan represented the new generation of spaceborne humans who had never known Earth. Bright, capable, and fiercely loyal to the human cause, but still bound by the traditional diplomacy that had defined humanity's approach to interstellar relations. Rising slowly to his feet, Jake felt the weight of 30 years pressing down on his shoulders. He looked around the chamber, taking in the representatives of 47 species arranged in their tiered seats. Some were humanoid, others utterly alien in form, but all were united in their quiet anticipation of humanity's acquiescence. Speaker Vexathera, esteemed representatives of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his deep voice carrying easily in the acoustically perfect chamber. For 30 years, humanity has proudly stood among you as partners in this grand alliance. We arrived as newcomers to the interstellar community, humble and eager to learn. We have since contributed significantly to our collective prosperity and security. He paused, noting the slight shifts in posture among several representatives. They expected the usual diplomatic preamble before acceptance. Resolution 4471, Jake continued, represents more than a simple redistribution of mining rights. It represents the culmination of a disturbing pattern that my government can no longer ignore. The Outer Rim territories were considered worthless until human engineers developed the extraction technology that made neuroptorium accessible. Human lives, 4,217 of them, to be precise, were lost establishing those operations in hostile conditions. Ambassador Telvor of the Zelani Confederacy leaned forward, his pale blue skin flushing slightly violet in what Jake recognized as a sign of impatience. Ambassador Morrison, we have all acknowledged humanity's contributions. The resource redistribution plan includes generous compensation. Compensation? Jake's voice sharpened, cutting through Telvor's measured tones. Credits cannot replace the sacrifice of human lives, nor can they address the fundamental issue at stake here today. A murmur rippled through the chamber. This deviation from protocol was unexpected. Jake pressed on, his carefully maintained diplomatic facade beginning to crack. Let me speak plainly, as it seems 30 years of polite diplomacy has failed to make our position clear. Humanity has contributed 45% of all pharmaceutical advancements adopted by Council worlds in the past decade. 30% of all commercial shipping carrying Council goods is operated by human companies. Our defensive technology protects 23 Council outposts. Our medical personnel staff, 61% of frontier medical facilities. He stepped away from his seat, moving to the center of the chamber, an unprecedented breach of protocol that caused several security officers to tense. Lieutenant Sullivan followed half a step behind, her hand instinctively moving toward her ceremonial sidearm. And how has the Council repaid these contributions? With incremental erosion of human rights and territories. The Proxima incident, the Terry sanctions, the Wolf 359 restrictions, and now, the outright theft of territories developed with human blood and ingenuity. Ambassador Korla of the Tauran hegemony rose to her impressive height, her gray-scaled face contorted in what might have been outrage. Point of order, Speaker. The human representative is using inflammatory language inappropriate for Council proceedings. Vexathera's wings buzzed in agitation. Ambassador Morrison, please moderate your tone and return to your designated position. Jake ignored both of them, his eyes sweeping the chamber. I have spent my career believing in the promise of this Council, that species from across the galaxy could come together in mutual respect and cooperation. Today, I see that promise was hollow. This Council functions not as a partnership of equals, but as a mechanism for the strong to exploit the contributions of others when it becomes convenient. The chamber erupted in protests and calls for order. Vexathera's amplified voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador Morrison, you will return to your seat immediately or be removed from these proceedings. A cold smile crossed Jake's face as he reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a small data crystal. The simple object caught the light as he held it up. That won't be necessary, Speaker. I'm not here to disrupt your vote on Resolution 4471. I'm here to inform you that its passage has become irrelevant. He placed the crystal on the central table with a soft click that somehow silenced the entire chamber. This data crystal contains humanity's formal withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately upon the passage of Resolution 4471. My government has authorized me to inform you that all human personnel will be recalled from Council facilities within 30 standard days. All human ships will cease carrying Council cargo. All human-developed medical facilities will prioritize human worlds exclusively. All human-operated defensive systems protecting Council worlds will be deactivated within 48 hours. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the air recyclers seemed to fade into insignificance. Ambassador Telvor was the first to recover. This is absurd. No species has ever withdrawn from the Council. The treaties binding humanity to the Council are not subject to unilateral termination. Jake turned to face the Zilani directly. We believe the same about the treaties protecting our rights in the Outer Rim. It seems treaties mean only what the Council decides they mean at any given moment. Humanity has simply decided to apply your own logic to the broader relationship. This is blackmail, hissed Ambassador Korla. This is consequence, Jake corrected. For too long, humanity has allowed itself to be the provider without receiving the respect of a true partner. That ends today. Speaker Vexathera descended from her podium, landing with uncharacteristic heaviness on the chamber floor. Her wings folded tightly against her iridescent carapace as she approached Jake. Ambassador Morrison, she said, her translator rendering her clicking speech into a tense whisper. You cannot possibly have the authority to take such a drastic step. This would devastate countless systems that rely on human resources. I have full presidential authority, Jake replied calmly. As for the devastating consequences, perhaps the Council should have considered them before systematically undermining human interests across the galaxy. He gestured toward the assembled representatives. You all believed humanity needed the Council, more than the Council needed humanity. Today, you'll discover how catastrophically wrong that assumption was. Jake turned to Lieutenant Sullivan. Lieutenant, initiate protocol severing. Authorization, Morrison Omega 642. Sullivan's eyes widened slightly, but her training took over. She tapped a sequence into her wrist communicator. Protocol severing confirmed. Ambassador. Countdown initiated. Jake addressed the Council again. In exactly 1 hour, all life support systems in this station that were designed or are maintained by human engineers will be shut down. I suggest you begin evacuation procedures immediately. The human contingent will be departing on the diplomatic vessel Athena within 40 minutes. Pandemonium erupted throughout the chamber. Representatives shouted over one another. Security personnel rushed toward the exits, and communication devices lit up across the room. Vexathera's wings buzzed in distress. You cannot be serious. There are over 4,000 representatives and staff on Nexus Prime. And there are emergency evacuation protocols capable of removing everyone within 30 minutes. Jake replied coolly. We designed those systems too. I suggest you use them. He turned away from the speaker, addressing the chamber at large. Let this be absolutely clear. As of this moment, humanity is no longer a member of the Galactic Council. We will defend our territories with all necessary force. We will forge new alliances based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. And we will remember who stood with us and who stood against us in this moment. Jake nodded to Sullivan, and together they began walking toward the chamber's main exit. The sea of representatives parted before them, shock written across alien faces of every description. As they reached the doorway, Jake paused and looked back one final time at the chaos he had unleashed. The day humanity joined the Council, we believed we had found our place in the universe. The day humanity leaves the Council is the day the universe discovers what it means to stand against us. The massive doors sealed behind them with a resonant thud. In the corridor, Lieutenant Sullivan finally found her voice. Ambassador, sir, are we really going through with this? The consequences. Jake's stern expression softened slightly. Kate, the consequences of continuing as we have would be far worse. Humanity reduced to second-class citizens. Our achievements exploited. Our sacrifices forgotten. Sometimes, you have to burn bridges to stop an invasion. He quickened his pace toward the docking bay where the Athena waited. Contact Earth. I need to speak with President Carter immediately. And send word to all human outposts to initiate Defense Protocol Heimdall. Things are going to get rough before they get better. The evacuation of Nexus Prime became the first visible consequence of humanity's withdrawal. As diplomatic vessels of all shapes and sizes scrambled to escape the station before life support failed, the human ship Athena departed with calm precision, its engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. Aboard the Athena, Jake sat in his private quarters, facing the stern visage of President Lisa Carter on a secure transmission. It's done, he reported simply. President Carter's dark eyes betrayed no emotion, though the lines around her mouth deepened slightly. At 67, she had guided human expansion for nearly a decade with cautious pragmatism. Any immediate repercussions? Panic, primarily. The Zilani and Tauran representatives were particularly vocal. I expect formal diplomatic protests within hours, followed by economic sanctions within days. Carter nodded slowly. Admiral Harris has positioned the 7th Fleet along our core territory boundaries. We're recalling all diplomatic personnel from Council worlds. The Outer Rim mining operations have activated their defensive shields. Jake leaned forward. Madam President, we need to move quickly to secure alternative trade arrangements with independent systems. The Mandari Federation has long been dissatisfied with Council policies. They could be our first new allies. Already in progress. Jake, Ambassador Wright is en route to Mandari Prime as we speak. Carter's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You've set us on an irreversible course. With all due respect, Madam President, the Council set us on this course. I merely acknowledge the destination. Carter's image flickered slightly as the Athena accelerated to FTL speeds. History will judge whether this was our finest hour or our greatest mistake. In the meantime, return to Earth. The people need to see the face of the man who just redefined humanity's place in the galaxy. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with the weight of what he had initiated. Lieutenant Sullivan's voice came through the intercom, professional as always, despite the circumstances. Ambassador, we'll reach Earth in approximately 14 hours. You should get some rest. Jake smiled grimly. Rest would be a luxury none of them could afford in the coming days. The immediate aftermath of humanity's withdrawal exceeded even Jake's most pessimistic predictions. Within 24 hours, the Council had issued an emergency declaration condemning human actions and imposing a galaxy-wide embargo on all human goods and services. Trade routes that had flowed freely for decades suddenly became hostile territories, with Council patrol ships intercepting and turning back human vessels. President Carter addressed the United Earth government from the historic Hall of Nations in Geneva, her powerful voice carrying to billions of humans across 100 worlds and outposts. Citizens of Earth and her colonies, today marks a turning point in our interstellar history. For 30 years, humanity has contributed to galactic peace and prosperity as members of the Council. That relationship has ended, not by our choice, but by our necessity. She stood tall despite her years, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back severely from her face. The Council's systematic dismantling of human rights and territories left us with no alternative but to chart our own course among the stars. We did not make this decision lightly, nor do we celebrate the hardships that will undoubtedly follow. Behind her stood Admiral Ben Harris in his crisp, white uniform, his weathered face a mask of determination. At his side was Jake Morrison, still in his diplomatic attire, a living symbol of the bridge humanity had just burned. We are implementing emergency measures to ensure continued supply lines to all human settlements. Carter continued. Rationing protocols will take effect at midnight. Our defensive forces are on high alert. But I want to be absolutely clear. Humanity seeks independence, not war. We will defend our territories with all necessary force, but we will not initiate hostilities. As she spoke, across the galaxy, the consequences of humanity's abrupt departure were already manifesting in ways the Council had never anticipated. On Korak Prime, the medical center serving the capital city's 12 million inhabitants suddenly found itself without the specialized human doctors who had staffed the trauma and genetic disease departments for decades. The waiting rooms filled with desperate patients as the remaining medical staff struggled to compensate for the loss of expertise. At Research Station Epsilon 9, the joint xenobiological project studying potential cures for the Marvellan plague ground to a halt as human scientists departed with their proprietary research methodologies and equipment. The Marvellan representatives watched in horror as their best hope for saving their species from extinction walked out the door. In the Centauri trade routes, where human security vessels had kept piracy at bay for 15 years, the sudden absence of patrols emboldened opportunists. Within days, merchant ships were disappearing at an alarming rate, their cargo stolen and crews abandoned in emergency pods, if they were lucky. Admiral Harris stood before the holographic display in Earth's Central Command, studying the real-time updates from across human space. His craggy face was illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical projections, highlighting the deep lines earned through 40 years of military service. The Zilani have moved 3 battle groups to the edge of the Perseus sector. He reported to the assembled Joint Chiefs and civilian leadership. They're posturing, testing our resolve. Jake Morrison, now officially appointed as Special Advisor to the President, studied the display. The Zilani were the most vocal about Resolution 4471. They've had their eyes on the neuroptorium deposits for years. "Let them posture," President Carter said firmly. "Our defensive positions in Perseus are solid. Admiral, your orders are to maintain defensive formations only. We will not fire the first shot." Harris nodded, though his expression suggested he might prefer a more proactive approach. "What about Mandari? Any progress with the diplomatic mission?" Jake stepped forward. "Ambassador Wright reports cautious interest. The Mandari Federation has its own grievances with the Council. They're considering a mutual defense pact, but they're understandably wary of Council reprisals." Carter's eyes remained fixed on the holographic display, where human territories glowed green amid the vast sea of Council space colored in red. "They need more than words. They need to see that we can stand on our own against Council pressure." As if in response to her statement, an urgent alert flashed across the display. Admiral Harris quickly accessed the incoming transmission. "Madam President, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The mining station at Proxima Centauri reports an unidentified vessel approaching their defensive perimeter. It's not responding to hails." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Outer Rim. Exactly where this all began. Harris manipulated the controls, bringing up a magnified view of the situation. "The station commander is requesting permission to activate weapon systems." Carter didn't hesitate. "Permission granted. We made our position clear. Human territories will be defended." The minutes that followed stretched into an agonizing wait as they monitored the situation from millions of kilometers away. Finally, the update came through. "The vessel has been identified as a Drar scout ship," Harris reported, his voice hardening. "They've launched an attack on the mining station's outer defenses." The Drar, a nomadic species known for mercenary activities, had never directly challenged human installations before. Their sudden aggression could only mean one thing. "They're testing us," Jake said quietly. "The Council wants to see if we're serious about defending our territories." Carter's jaw set in a hard line. "Show them exactly how serious we are, Admiral." Harris nodded to his communications officer. "Authorize the station commander to use full defensive capabilities, and dispatch the cruiser Thermopylae from Jupiter Station to reinforce the position." The conflict at Proxima Centauri became the first test of humanity's resolve. The mining station's defenses, designed to withstand asteroid impacts and radiation, proved equally effective against Drar weapons. When the Thermopylae arrived 12 hours later, it found only debris where the Drar scout ship had been, and the mining operation continuing, uninterrupted. The message was clear. Humanity would not be easily dislodged from its holdings. In the weeks that followed, similar probing attacks occurred across human territories. Each was met with swift, decisive response. No human outpost fell. No territory was ceded. The cost was high. 17 human vessels damaged. 42 lives lost. But the determination to stand firm never wavered. On Earth, the population rallied behind President Carter's leadership. Rationing was accepted without complaint. Industrial production shifted to essential goods and defensive technologies. Former luxuries imported from Council worlds were replaced by human-made alternatives, or simply done without. The psychological impact of isolation was countered by a surge of human pride. Cultural expressions celebrating human resilience and ingenuity filled the entertainment networks. Standing Alone, a hastily produced documentary about the history of human space exploration, became the most watched program in decades. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison worked tirelessly to forge new alliances. The diplomatic corps, freed from Council protocols and restrictions, pursued relationships with independent systems, and disaffected Council members with unprecedented aggressiveness. The first breakthrough came 53 days after the withdrawal, when the Mandari Federation formally announced a trade and mutual defense agreement with humanity. The Mandari, whose crystalline technology complemented human manufacturing capabilities perfectly, had long chafed under Council trade restrictions. With humanity offering unrestricted access to its markets and technological exchange, the benefits outweighed the risks of Council displeasure. Ambassador Salenti of the Mandari personally signed the agreement in a ceremony broadcast across human space. Her translucent form shimmered under the lights as she stood beside President Carter. "The Mandari people recognize in humanity a kindred spirit," Salenti announced, her melodic voice requiring no electronic translation for human ears. "We, too, have known what it means to have our contributions undervalued by the Council. Together, we forge a new path based on mutual respect and benefit." The Mandari Alliance opened the floodgates. Within months, 6 more independent systems had established formal relations with humanity. Trade began to flow through new routes, bypassing Council space entirely. Human ships, no longer bound by Council regulatory restrictions, proved more efficient and adaptable than anyone had anticipated. But the Council was not idle during this time. As human influence grew among independent systems, the pressure to bring the upstart species back into line intensified. The crisis point came 8 months after humanity's withdrawal. Minister Theiss of the Korak system sent an urgent, encrypted message directly to Jake Morrison, bypassing normal diplomatic channels. Jake received the transmission in his office at the newly established Bureau of Interspecies Relations in Geneva. Theiss's purple-hued face filled the screen. The minister's characteristic facial ridges flushed dark with agitation. "Advisor Morrison, I risk much by contacting you." Theiss began without preamble. "The medical crisis on Korak Prime has reached catastrophic proportions. Without human medical expertise, the Marvelin plague has spread to 17 major population centers. The Council has promised assistance, but none has arrived." Jake leaned forward, concern evident in his expression. "Minister Theiss, the Korak system is still aligned with the Council, under current policy. We cannot." "I am not asking for charity, Morrison." Theiss interrupted, desperation edging his voice. "I am offering a formal alliance. The Korak Assembly voted yesterday to withdraw from the Council. Following humanity's example, we seek immediate medical assistance in exchange for exclusive mining rights in the Korak asteroid belt." This was unexpected. The Korak system, while not among the most powerful Council members, occupied a strategically valuable position near several major trade routes. Their defection would be a significant blow to Council unity. "Minister, I'll need to consult with President Carter immediately. Can you hold your position for 24 hours? Theiss's ridges darkened further. "We will try, Morrison. But be aware, the Council has sent 3 warships to maintain order in our system. They are due to arrive in 36 hours. The implications were clear. The Council intended to make an example of Korak, to show other potential defectors the price of aligning with humanity. Within hours, President Carter had convened an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Admiral Harris, Jake Morrison, and the heads of all major government departments gathered in the secure chamber beneath the presidential residence. "If we commit to aiding Korak, we risk direct confrontation with Council forces," Harris stated bluntly, pointing to the tactical display showing the approaching Council warships. "Our nearest battle group is here, at Wolf 359. They could reach Korak in 48 hours, but the Council ships will already be in position." Nicole Clark, the brilliant engineer who had designed much of humanity's space infrastructure, spoke up. "What about the prototype displacement drive? The Odysseus is equipped with it." All eyes turned to her. The displacement drive was humanity's most closely guarded technological advance, a propulsion system that could reduce interstellar travel time by 70%. It had been developed in secret, kept hidden from the Council, for fear they would demand the technology be shared under existing treaties. Admiral Harris shook his head. The Odysseus is a science vessel, not a warship. It has minimal defensive capabilities. But it could reach Korak before the Council ships, Jake pointed out. It could evacuate key personnel, deliver medical supplies, and be completely vulnerable if the Council decides to open fire, Harris countered. President Carter, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. What's the crew complement of the Odysseus? 112, Clark answered promptly, plus capacity for up to 70 additional personnel. Carter's eyes met Jake's across the table. Volunteer mission only. Make it clear to the crew exactly what they're risking. Jake understood immediately. I'll go personally. If we're asking people to risk their lives, they deserve to have leadership on board. Harris began to protest, but Carter raised a hand to silence him. Jake is right. This mission needs diplomatic authority as well as technical expertise. Dr. Nicole Clark, you'll accompany him as technical advisor. Admiral, prepare a small security team, volunteers only. The Admiral's weathered face showed his disapproval, but years of discipline kept him from further objection. Yes, Madam President. One more thing, Carter added, her voice hardening. Prepare the First Fleet for immediate deployment to Wolf 359. If the Council threatens our people, I want overwhelming force ready to respond. 20 hours later, the Odysseus slipped quietly from Earth orbit, its experimental engines glowing with an unnatural purple light. On the bridge, Jake Morrison stood behind Captain Eliza Hernandez, watching as the stars blurred and stretched around them. Displacement drive engaged, Hernandez reported calmly, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her awareness of their precarious mission. We'll reach Korak space in 14 hours. Jake nodded, turning to Dr. Clark, who was monitoring the engine performance from an adjacent console. How's our new toy holding up, Nicole? Clark's fingers danced across the controls, her attention focused on the stream of data. Within parameters, though I'm seeing some fluctuation in the quantum field, nothing critical. Lieutenant Commander James Wilson, head of the 12-person security team, approached from the tactical station. Ambassador, we've received an update from Korak. Minister Theiss reports Council loyalists are attempting to seize control of the planetary defense grid. If they succeed, we could be fired upon as we enter the system. Jake absorbed this news with outward calm, though inwardly he questioned the wisdom of the mission. 125 lives, all volunteers, all aware of the risks, but under his authority nonetheless. Captain Hernandez, adjust our approach. We'll come in from the system's ecliptic plane to minimize our profile. Lieutenant Commander, have your team prepare for possible ground deployment. Dr. Clark, I need you to prioritize the medical supplies, what's absolutely essential if we need to evacuate quickly. Each acknowledged their orders with professional efficiency. Jake moved to the communication station, recording a brief update for Earth. He kept his tone measured, factual, betraying none of the doubt that gnawed at him. President Carter, we're proceeding to Korak as planned. The situation has complicated slightly, but we remain confident in our ability to complete the mission. I'll update you when we reach the system. Morrison out. What Jake couldn't know as the Odysseus hurtled through space was that the situation at Korak was far worse than Minister Theiss had indicated. The Council warships had accelerated unexpectedly, arriving in the system hours ahead of schedule. The Loyalist faction had indeed seized control of key defense installations, and Minister Theiss and his supporters were now barricaded in the capital's central administrative complex. More ominously, a fourth ship had joined the Council forces, a massive vessel of unique design, its purpose unknown, but its presence casting a shadow of dread across the system. The Odysseus dropped out of displacement drive at the edge of the Korak system, instantly going to stealth protocols. Captain Hernandez ordered minimal power to all non-essential systems as they drifted toward the fourth planet, home to the system's primary population. On the main viewer, the tactical situation became immediately clear and dire. 3 Council warships in standard orbital formation around Korak Prime, and the fourth, larger vessel holding position near the system's star. Its purpose still unclear. "Analysis of the unknown vessel?" Jake asked quietly. Wilson consulted his tactical display. "Configuration doesn't match any known Council ship class. Size suggests a capital ship, but energy signature is unusual. It's generating power levels far beyond normal operational requirements." Nicole Clark had gone pale, her eyes fixed on her own readings. "That's not a warship," she whispered. "At least, not a conventional one. That energy signature. It's focusing stellar material." "Meaning what exactly?" Jake pressed. Clark looked up, horror evident in her expression. "It's a planet cracker. Theoretical weapon developed by the Draar but banned by Council edict centuries ago. It uses a star's own material to generate a focused plasma beam capable of cracking a planet," Jake finished grimly. "They wouldn't." "They already are," Wilson reported, his voice tight. "The vessel is powering up its primary systems. Target trajectory indicates Korak Prime." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. The Council wasn't just putting down a rebellion or making an example of Korash. They were preparing to obliterate an entire world, killing billions, to prevent the spread of defections to humanity's side. "How long until it can fire?" he demanded. Clark consulted her readings. "Based on power buildup, 37 minutes. Jake's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. The Odysseus was no match for even 1 Council warship, let alone 3 plus this planet cracker. The First Fleet was still hours away at best. Evacuation was impossible, even if they could reach the surface. They could save only a handful of the billions on Korak Prime. Captain Hernandez voiced the question they were all thinking. "Your orders, Ambassador." Jake closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the decision crushing down on him. When he opened them, his resolve was set. "Open a channel to Earth, Priority Alpha, then prepare to bring all systems to full power. We're going to make ourselves very visible." Hernandez looked startled. "Sir? We can't fight them, and we can't save the planet alone. But we can bear witness. The Council is about to commit an atrocity that violates every principle they claim to uphold. The galaxy needs to see it happen." As the communications officer worked to establish the secure link to Earth, Jake turned to Dr. Clark. "Nicole, I need options. That thing has a weakness. Everything does. Find it." Clark nodded grimly and bent over her console, fingers flying across the interface as she analyzed the planet cracker's structure. The connection to Earth established, Jake found himself facing President Carter, Admiral Harris, and the entire Defense Council. "Madam President, we have a critical situation," Jake reported without preamble. "The Council has deployed a planet cracker weapon at Korash. They're preparing to destroy the entire planet. We have approximately 35 minutes before they can fire." The shock that rippled across the faces in the secure room was palpable, even across millions of kilometers. "A planet cracker," Admiral Harris repeated incredulously. "That technology was banned after the Novan genocide. Using it would violate the Council's own most sacred laws. Apparently they're willing to break those laws to prevent others from following our example." Jake replied bitterly. "The First Fleet is still 18 hours out, even at maximum burn," Harris interrupted. President Carter's face had gone ashen, but her voice remained steady. "What's your assessment, Jake? What can we do?" Jake hesitated, the enormity of the situation threatening to overwhelm him. "We can't evacuate a significant population in the time available. The Odysseus can't engage the Council ships directly. I'm having Dr. Clark look for vulnerabilities in the planet cracker, but realistically..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Realistically, They were about to witness the annihilation of billions of lives. Carter's expression hardened. "Ambassador Morrison, you are authorized to take any and all actions you deem necessary to prevent this atrocity. I repeat, any and all actions. The responsibility is yours." Jake understood what she was doing. If he failed, if billions died, the political fallout would land on him, not her. It was the necessary calculus of leadership, and he accepted it without resentment. "Understood, Madam President, Morrison out." As the transmission ended, Nicole Clark called out from her station. "Ambassador, I've found something. The planet Cracker uses a quantum focusing array to channel the stellar material. The array is powerful, but incredibly sensitive to disruption. A targeted energy pulse at the right frequency could destabilize it." Hope flickered briefly before reality reasserted itself. "We don't have weapons capable of delivering that kind of precise energy pulse," Jake pointed out. "No," Clark agreed. "But we do have a displacement drive that generates exactly the kind of quantum field that could interfere with their focusing array." Captain Hernandez immediately grasped the implication. "You're suggesting we use the Odysseus itself as the weapon?" Clark nodded grimly. "If we can get close enough to the planet Cracker and initiate a controlled overload of the displacement drive, the resulting quantum surge should disable their focusing array." "How close is close enough?" Wilson asked. "Within 5,000 kilometers," Clark replied. "Well, within their weapons range." "And the Odysseus?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Clark met his gaze steadily. "The surge would destroy the drive and likely cause catastrophic damage to the ship." Silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. A suicide mission. Jake looked around at the faces of the crew, seeing determination mixed with fear. They had all volunteered for a dangerous mission, but this went far beyond what any of them had anticipated. "Captain Hernandez, prepare to evacuate non-essential personnel to the emergency shuttles. They'll have one chance to make it to Korax's moon before the council ships can intercept." Hernandez nodded, her expression solemn. "And the rest of us?" Jake straightened his shoulders. "I'll need a minimal crew to pilot the Odysseus to the target. Volunteers only. I'll be staying aboard." "As will I," Clark said immediately. "No one else understands the displacement drive well enough to modify it for this purpose." One by one, other officers voiced their intention to remain. Captain Hernandez, Lieutenant Commander Wilson, the Chief Engineer, the Tactical Officer, a skeleton crew of 22, willing to sacrifice everything to save billions of unknown lives. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. 93 crew members were loaded into the Odysseus's 4 emergency shuttles, each equipped with enough supplies for 72 hours. The shuttles departed in rapid succession, using the planet's gravity well to accelerate toward Korax's habitable moon. Meanwhile, Clark and the engineering team worked feverishly to modify the displacement drive, converting a device designed for precise, interstellar travel into an improvised weapon. "Modifications complete," Clark reported, her face streaked with sweat despite the bridge's cool temperature. "The drive will generate a quantum pulse approximately 3 times stronger than its normal operational field. That should be enough to disrupt their focusing array." Jake nodded, turning to Captain Hernandez. "How much time until the planet Cracker fires?" 7 minutes, based on their energy buildup," she responded grimly. "Plot an intercept course. Maximum acceleration. Lieutenant Commander Wilson. Prepare to divert all power to shields when we come within their weapons range." The Odysseus surged forward, its conventional engines straining as it accelerated toward the massive planet Cracker. Almost immediately, the 3 Council warships broke orbit, moving to intercept. "They've spotted us," Wilson reported unnecessarily. "Energy signatures indicate weapons charging." Jake gripped the back of the captain's chair. "Stay on course. Everything depends on reaching that planet Cracker." The first energy blasts from the Council ships flashed past the Odysseus, near misses that nonetheless rattled the ship. "Return fire!" Hernandez ordered. "Make them work for it." The Odysseus's modest defensive weapons fired in response, not causing any significant damage, but forcing the Council ships to adjust their approach. 5 minutes to planet cracker firing position, the navigation officer called out. A direct hit rocked the ship, sending several crew members sprawling. Warning klaxons blared as damage reports flooded in. "Shields at 63%, Wilson shouted over the noise. "Port thrusters damaged." Hernandez compensated immediately, adjusting their course to account for the reduced thrust. "Reroute auxiliary power to the shields. We need to hold together a little longer." Another hit, more alarms. The acrid smell of burning circuitry filled the bridge. "Shields at 41%. We've lost 2 defensive arrays." Jake watched the tactical display with growing desperation. The planet cracker loomed larger, its massive form dwarfing the Odysseus. The energy building within its focusing array was visible now, a blinding point of light gathered from the nearby star. 3 minutes to intercept, the navigation officer reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The Council ships pressed their attack, realizing too late the Odysseus's true target. They adjusted course, attempting to place themselves between the human vessel and the planet cracker. But their maneuvers had taken them too far out of position. "We're going to make it," Jake breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Then, disaster struck. A precisely targeted shot from the lead Council ship struck the Odysseus's main propulsion system. The ship lurched violently, alarms screaming from every console. "We've lost main engines," the engineering officer shouted. "Switching to emergency thrusters." Clark looked up from her console, face pale. "We're losing momentum. At this rate, we won't reach the effective range before the planet cracker fires." Jake refused to accept defeat. "What if we initiate the displacement drive now? Use it to jump the remaining distance?" Clark shook her head. "The drive isn't designed for short-range jumps. The calculations—" "Could you do it?" Jake pressed. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Theoretically, yes. But it would be a one-way trip. We'd have no way to control exactly where we emerge, or to prevent an immediate overload. Better odds than we have now," Jake decided. "Do it." Clark turned to her console, fingers dancing across the controls as she input the necessary parameters. Displacement drive spooling up. Everyone brace for transition. The familiar purple glow enveloped the bridge as the experimental drive engaged. Reality seemed to stretch and distort around them, the stars smearing into lines of light. For an eternal moment, the Odysseus existed in a state between normal space and somewhere else entirely. Then, with a violent shudder, they reappeared, directly alongside the planet cracker, less than 3,000 kilometers from its massive hull. "Now, Nicole!" Jake shouted. Clark slammed her hand down on the final control, initiating the drive overload sequence. The purple glow intensified, becoming blinding as the quantum field expanded exponentially. On the main viewer, they could see the planet cracker's focusing array beginning to destabilize, the carefully contained stellar material writhing like a living thing as the quantum interference disrupted its containment field. "It's working!" Wilson exclaimed. The Odysseus shook violently as systems began to fail under the strain of the expanding quantum field. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Support beams groaned and buckled. "Structural integrity failing," the computer announced with artificial calm. "Catastrophic hull breach imminent." Jake looked around at the brave crew who had chosen to stay, who had chosen to sacrifice everything. "It's been an honor," he said simply. Captain Hernandez nodded, a small smile on her lips despite the chaos. "The honor was ours, Ambassador." The quantum field reached critical expansion, engulfing both the Odysseus and the planet cracker in a sphere of purple-white energy. For an instant, both vessels seemed to exist in multiple states, simultaneously, whole and shattered, present and absent. Then the field collapsed in upon itself, releasing its energy in a massive shockwave that rippled through space. When the brilliance faded, the planet Cracker was drifting, its focusing array a twisted ruin, its threat neutralized. Of the Odysseus, nothing remained but scattered debris. The three Council warships, caught on the edge of the shockwave, tumbled helplessly, their systems temporarily disabled by the quantum disruption. From their position on Korak's moon, the evacuated crew of the Odysseus witnessed the destruction of their ship and the salvation of billions. Their emergency transmitters broadcast what they had seen to any vessel within range. Across the galaxy, the news spread rapidly. Humanity had sacrificed 22 of its own to prevent a genocidal attack by the Council, an attack that violated the Council's own most sacred principles. The fact that the Drar, known Council mercenaries, had operated the planet Cracker removed any possibility of denial. The political fallout was immediate and devastating. 6 systems announced their withdrawal from the Council within days. The Mandari Federation publicly reaffirmed its alliance with humanity and extended protection to Korash. Independent worlds that had remained neutral now openly sought human trade and diplomatic relations. On Earth, the 22 crew members of the Odysseus became instant heroes, their names etched into monuments in every human settlement. Jake Morrison, Nicole Clark, Eliza Hernandez, James Wilson, and the others who had made the ultimate sacrifice were honored with the highest civilian and military decorations humanity could bestow. President Carter addressed a solemn joint session of the United Earth Government, her voice thick with emotion despite her usual composure. They gave their lives not just for humanity, but for a principle that transcends species or political boundaries, that power does not confer the right to obliterate those who disagree. Their sacrifice has changed the course of galactic history in ways we are only beginning to understand. In the months that followed, humanity's position continued to strengthen. The First Fleet, arriving at Korak hours after the confrontation, secured the system and established a permanent defensive presence. The Council warships, once their systems recovered, withdrew without further conflict. Trade networks expanded, bypassing Council-controlled routes entirely. Human innovation, freed from Council restrictions, accelerated at an unprecedented rate. The displacement drive technology, thought lost with the Odysseus, was reconstructed from Nicole Clark's research notes and improved upon by her colleagues. Most significantly, the alliance structure of the galaxy began to shift. What had begun as humanity standing alone evolved into a coalition of independent systems, united by mutual respect and shared interests. The Human Accords, as they came to be known, established principles of non-interference, fair trade, and mutual defense that attracted more signatories with each passing month. 1 year to the day after Jake Morrison placed the withdrawal notice on the Council table, a delegation arrived at Earth. It included representatives from 17 species, including the Zilani and Tauran, who had once been humanity's most vocal critics in the Council. President Carter received them in the same Hall of Nations where she had rallied humanity a year earlier. Admiral Harris stood at her side, his uniform now bearing the insignia of Supreme Commander of Coalition Forces. Ambassador Telvor of the Zilani stepped forward, his blue skin flushed with the violet hue of emotional intensity. President Carter, I come bearing a formal request from species who once stood against humanity, but who now seek reconciliation. Carter's expression remained carefully neutral. The Human Accords are open to all who accept their principles. Ambassador Telvor, even former adversaries. Telvor bowed slightly. It is not membership in your accords that we seek, though that may come in time. We come to request the resumption of human medical services, trade relations, and defensive cooperation. The past year has demonstrated all too clearly what we lost when humanity withdrew from the Council. Carter allowed a small smile to cross her face. And what did the Council lose, Ambassador? Telvor met her gaze directly. Its soul, President Carter. Its commitment to the principles it claimed to uphold. Its future. He paused, then added with visible difficulty, its honor. Carter nodded, satisfied with the admission. Humanity has no desire for continued isolation or conflict. We built our civilization on cooperation and exchange. But we will never again accept a position of subservience or allow our contributions to be exploited without fair recognition. We understand, Telvor replied. We propose a new relationship, not humanity rejoining the Council, but the establishment of formal diplomatic relations between equals, the Galactic Council and the Human Coalition, as separate but cooperative entities. It was more than anyone could have predicted a year earlier. The mighty Council, which had dismissed humanity's withdrawal as a temporary tantrum, now seeking terms as equals. Carter glanced at a side table where a framed image stood, the official portrait of the Odysseus crew. Jake Morrison at the center, his expression determined and principled. The man who had burned the bridge and, in doing so, forced the construction of a better one. Ambassador Telvor, Carter said, turning back to the alien delegation. Humanity accepts your proposal in principle. The details will require extensive negotiation. Of course. Relief visibly washed over the assembled representatives. Telvor bowed more deeply this time. Thank you, President Carter. The Council recognizes that it may take generations to rebuild the trust that was lost. We are prepared for that journey. As the formal proceedings continued, Admiral Harris leaned closer to Carter, speaking quietly. Jake would be proud of this moment. Carter nodded, her eyes still on the portrait. He saw further than any of us. He understood that sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone to prove your worth. Outside the Hall of Nations, the streets of Geneva were filled with humans going about their daily lives, unaware of the historic meeting taking place. Children played in parks. Merchants sold their wares. Scientists pursued new discoveries. Life continued, strengthened rather than diminished by the challenges of the past year. In orbit above Earth, ships from a dozen worlds docked at the massive space station that served as humanity's gateway to the stars. Among them, vessels bearing the insignia of former Council worlds, now seeking what humanity had to offer. The day humanity left the Council was the day the universe discovered that principles, when backed by courage and sacrifice, could reshape the order of galaxies. It was the day humanity proved that standing alone didn't mean standing weak. It was the day the universe learned respect,